Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. You're listening to episode 4 of season 3. My name is Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week I have our first guest from Ireland. Claire has lived on both sides of the Atlantic, but is now back home in Ireland. I think you'll be able to tell this was a fun conversation. She actually comes from a large family of misophones, which you'll hear about. She has tons of tips she uses for dealing with miso that you're going to want to hear, and some great stories about dealing with miso at work, like the sniffling woman and the bowl-banging man. Great stuff. About 7 minutes in through my usual mic was having problems, so I switched over to AirPods, so you might notice a difference. Not as good, but still works. I have a whole bunch of interviews going on via text message and DMs. A little too many at the moment because they're so good and I want to focus on fewer at a time. But please hit me up on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast or on Twitter at Misophonia Show if you're interested in doing non-audio, text-based interviews. The new website will be up shortly with all these. All right, so without further ado, here's my conversation with Claire. Yeah, then I guess I'll just jump into it. Claire, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Adele.
And so let's tell the listeners where you're from. Get that out of the way.
Yeah, I am from Ireland, a city called Cork, right down in the south of Ireland. I don't know, have you heard of it?
Actually at Cork, yeah, I think one of my neighbors across the street, he's got relatives up in Cork. He's mentioned that a number of times. Sounds like a great place.
It is. It's great. Not everybody knows it. People will, usually know Dublin, but it's the second biggest city in Ireland, right down in the south.
Okay, cool.
And I moved home last year after 14 years away in London and New York. So it is so lovely to be back. An absolute delight. I love being back in Cork.
That's great. And it was at, I guess so, yeah, I also like to, but kind of what people do for work. I guess were you kind of traveling around for work mainly?
I worked in finance. So I first did a decade in London working in equities. And then through that, I had the opportunity to move to New York and transfer with my company. So I did that in 2015 and it was absolutely incredible. And actually that's, of course, America is so good at being, progressive and doing things ahead of other countries. And that's where I went to my first misophonia convention. Now, as I say that, I went to the one in Minnesota a couple of years ago. As I say that, I realized I should probably tell you something first, which is that when I first realized that it was a thing, that there was a name for it, I was in my mid-20s and I found it online and in my head pronounced it misophonia. And then told my family and everything. We've all had that moment where it's illuminating. And then years later, like literally 10 years later, I go to the convention in Minnesota. I'm sitting there and Marsha Johnson is making the opening remarks. And two things happened. The first was I felt completely overwhelmed because it was just this acknowledgement of it, and everyone in this room collectively acknowledging it, like it being real. And I felt sort of tears coming into my eyes and I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, Claire, get your shit together. Oh God, sorry, I shouldn't curse, should I?
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, get yourself together, because if I start to cry, I'll start to sniffle and then I'll have to remove myself from the convention. But the second thing that happened was that all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, it's not pronounced misophonia. And I've told everyone that it's pronounced misophonia. Right. I mean, we just call it my miso in the family.
Hey, whatever works. Yeah.
So I have since tried to correct it, but there's so much muscle memory from calling it miso that might happen on the podcast. So I realized that's quite the tangent to have started off on. But anytime I speak, I'm going to be tempted to say miso, so I may as well just get it out
That's
there
probably
now.
the least of our auditory worries. Don't worry about that. We'll get into sure much nastier things to listen to, but uh, but I just want to say I was in that room too, and so that was my first convention. I'm actually here in St. Paul, so I was the Minnesota
Oh, how
convention was my
funny.
first one, and I had all the same feelings. It's just like
Mad, isn't
that
it?
it was intense. It was like I was
Hmm.
trying to and I could feel that everyone's trying not to kind of like lose their s, and yeah, I was right there, someone there feeling the same thing, so that's amazing.
Mm, it was an insane moment. It really was.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I went to the one last year in Denver,
oh,
which is
Denver. Oh, well done.
which is actually what inspired the podcast. I started like the week after I came back, because I bumped into the same people,
Hmm.
and that kind of confirmed that just talking about this stuff with others is
Yeah, it's so therapeutic because it's such a funny thing with the condition. I never know what to refer to it as actually. But it's that it's so quirky. It's there are I know there's consistencies in terms of um how people suffer and what the triggers are, but it's such a lawless sort of condition at times where you'll have explained to someone, say, new who's learning about it, how it works, and then you might be out with them and they'll say, but why isn't that annoying you now? and and it's because there's so many sort of environmental factors that can influence it, or how how much sleep you've had, all these small little things that make it really difficult for other people to understand how, oh, 1 minute it can be fine and another minute it can't, and oh, a noisy room is actually okay now. And so yeah, no, I find it super therapeutic to listen to some of the guests that you've had on and just find it so relatable, just normalizes it.
how far back does it go for you? I'd love to hear about also eventually how kind of I've never had somebody from international high finance on the podcast, so I'm thinking billion the TV show Billions and Boiler Room and stuff like that. So
Well, it's
uh,
funny. Well, okay, actually, so we're jumping right now. I'll
I
go
jump around
to your
all the
first
time. I just
question.
said two things. Yeah,
So your first question was the like earliest
yeah.
memories of it,
Just
I
do
guess.
that. Yeah, yeah.
And for that, do you know, after listening to a number of your other guests, and actually I picked this up a little bit at the convention as well, I realized I was really lucky because I did not get onset at a young age of 6 or 7. It was definitively my teenage years.
Hmm.
Um, and for that, it meant I really only had a few years in secondary school, so yeah, high school for you guys, and then college in that environment where, because I recognize that the challenges of that environment where you're young, you can't control it, you have to stay in the classroom. Um, so I thankfully, yeah, the onset was, I guess, my teenage years, and it was the classic, people eating. And funny enough, it was actually a couple of girlfriends in school where I really noticed it. And I know normally it's the family environment first. And I
Yeah.
wonder, I've been thinking about this. I wonder, was I slightly shielded from the aggressive fight or flight trigger because I grew up in a classic Irish big family. So all like meal times were loud anyway, you know? Or
Yeah,
there was
I always
some
wonder about
argument
that.
going on, or
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Like like for sure, my siblings and my parents all trigger me, um, but I just don't remember getting as intense a fight or flight at that age, um, at that time. It was almost it happened with school friends first, and then obviously it escalated over time
Yeah.
with my family as well. Um, but yeah, my only theory for that is that it was such a loud environment that it didn't allow for the obvious
Yeah, maybe you
triggers
just always had
sound.
background noise at the
Yeah.
house or something.
I
And
mean, it
then
was
it's
chaotic.
yeah, it's interesting. And then at school it's
Um,
probably like, okay, you gotta like focus and
yeah, it was, well, in particular, now to be fair, there wasn't really much eating during class or anything that went on in
right.
school, but it started with like lunches I'd go to with my friends, and there was one girl that would clash her teeth off of the cutlery or the silverware, as you'd say.
Yeah.
And I just remember that was like a really, really early one where I just couldn't handle it at all. And then I remember one time, and I tried to explain it, but I didn't have the words to explain it, or I didn't know what it was. But I had tried in some way to explain that this was something that really annoyed me, and I thought, oh God, teenage girls. I remember at one point she took me aside and explained to me how it really hurt her, how I couldn't find a way to eat with her, things like that, and all the drama of it. But yeah, so then through college it was similar. It was primarily all around eating noises and sniffling. And then, as we all know, just over time, through my
Yeah.
20s, added lots of triggers. And of course, then I went into an open plan office environment, which
Yeah,
I
high
never forget.
finance, money thrown around everywhere.
Well,
Um,
I don't know if you remember this from the Minnesota convention, but um, Dr. Johnson, she said at one point that it brings a whole new meaning to the phrase familiarity breeds contempt.
oh
And
yeah.
that
Okay.
resonated with me so much because, you know, in the London office in particular, we'd sometimes do these seat rotations just to mix things up, or if we'd had new people hired. And, I'd always be so excited by it because unless someone's a definitive trigger person when you first meet them, like, you just know even by the look of them that they're going to be a trigger person. But
Yeah.
some people, they fly under the radar. And it is this whole familiarity breeds contempt, or you sit beside them, you're like, oh, this is great. She's a delight. Oh, she doesn't make noise when she eats, all this. And then, months later, you're like, why does she keep curling her hair like that? you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I would learn to recognize it too, where I'd noticed something and then I think to myself, oh no, here we go. Because I knew it was about to be, filed away, that my brain had caught it,
Right.
and added that to the list. But I will say now, to be fair, the first few years of working in London in the open plan office, and it was first I worked on quite a small trade floor. It was That was definitely challenging. And in part because I still didn't know that it was a thing. So it was a particular day at work when I don't know if I was particularly tired or hungover or something, but the guy that sat beside me came back to his desk with a load of food, and I just lost the plot. And I just got my things, walked out of the office, got the tube home, at the subway home,
Oh
and
yeah.
sat in my apartment, and I was just like, this is not normal. Like, this is not normal, that I cannot function. And I just started randomly Googling things. And that's when it came up.
Yeah.
Um,
So you basically you were kind of
just
having
had like a
like a
meltdown
panic attack,
moment.
basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, this can't be normal. Um, and it's so interesting now because when I think back on that, I guess I was around 25 or 26 at the time. And I think I'm hopeful at least that the generation coming up, that they won't ever have to wait that long to learn, because at that time there wasn't any smartphones or anything, or we hadn't gotten into this sort of habit of any thought or question we have these days, you can just throw it into Google. No
Right.
thought goes unanswered or question goes unanswered.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas this was a case of, I went home and I opened up my laptop and tried to do some research,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and it was, oh my God. I mean, I've heard people on your podcast talk about that moment where you learn it's a thing. It's amazing. It's
Yeah. I
just,
know. And you can't
oh,
stop. You can't stop researching it. You're just basically
I
up all night,
know.
and
Oh,
yeah.
I found it actually. First thing I did was tell my family, because I have four siblings, and so we're a family of seven in total, and my dad has it, and
Oh. Okay.
of the siblings, four of the five of us have it.
Wow. Okay.
I know. Lest there be any doubt that there's a genetic trait going on, like it's definitely five of the seven family members. Now, the only thing is that mine is by far the most severe.
Do
So,
they all still have it, or and it's just
yep,
a lower level? Okay, yeah,
just
it's
a
interesting
lower
because
level.
I was just talking to somebody else on an upcoming for an upcoming episode, and she said, I mean, you'll hear it actually probably a little bit before yours, but she still has it hardcore. Like hers went up, and her brothers went down. They both had it around the same time at
Oh,
the at the
wow.
age of 7 or 8, and his is practically gone. Hers kind of kept going, and her dad and
I,
their dad had it too. And this is kind of where we're just kind of like speculating on things like whether the whole nature versus nurture, and maybe hers is a little bit more. Uh, maybe this we're just totally speculating, but like maybe
oh,
hers
I
is
know.
a little bit more genetically, and his was more instilled because I'm sure their dad kind of like
Because he picked up on things.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
so interesting.
that's why I
Because
just
I've
bring
never
it
heard
up.
of
Yeah.
someone going down. I
No, I
mean,
know that's like a
someone should analyze his
we
brain,
need to
please.
we need to like surround him at the next convention. But
Yeah.
it's
Uh,
interesting. So yeah, because you said that nobody was you don't really notice it being getting triggered when you were growing up, and lo and behold, like your whole family basically has it. Um,
mhm,
what did
mhm.
you notice? I'm just curious what you noticed growing up. Did you notice it at all, or was everyone just kind of like
Oh
was
no,
there
I
so
did.
much chaos that it was
I did. I did. It was. I mean, I guess it was more the first triggers where I noticed a fight or flight. I just remember being more the school ones, but
yeah,
it was in very quick succession, and that it would have crept into the family environment as well. And I just, I guess it was all the eating noises again. So we'd have
yeah,
fights over that. Yeah, we'd have fights over that. And then because I'm one of the older ones, I would have moved. I left
oh yeah,
Ireland
you
after
lived there.
college. I went to London. So um, there wasn't as much time, I guess, where I was being triggered all the time by my siblings,
Yeah,
especially because the two youngest ones would have been properly like kids, who
yeah,
tend to trigger me less. But when I was leaving home. Now, it's very different today because we're all adults today. So today, if we have a family dinner, then they are very good. It's like Claire's miso. Now, they're good also because they do actually understand it.
yeah. This is
Because,
amazing. I mean,
yeah.
this is like a
Um, so they don't have it as aggressively, but they are so patient and accommodating. We'll have music on if we're having dinner together, or if we're going out to dinner. Um, where does Claire need to sit type thing. And
oh great.
in this cruel twist of fate, so I have quite a lot of visual triggers, and my mom does not stop moving. God love her. um, so one trick that we have is, say, with the family of seven, or if all of us are out together, that if I sit on the same side as my mom and have someone in between us, then I don't see the visual triggers. If we're on
Hmm.
the same side of the dinner table. Um, and then if I'm one person away from her. So yeah, they're very
I totally
accommodating.
understand that calculation. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've all done that.
Yeah.
Just don't be in my field of vision, and
Yeah.
no one will get hurt.
Exactly. But no, they're good. And even like recently we had a little night away for my just the females of the family for my mum's birthday, and my youngest sister, we were figuring out what way we would carpool, and she said to me, "Oh, look, my hay fever is a bit bad at the moment." And so it was a combination of her not wanting to stress me by, um, sniffling, but also her not wanting to be stressed by not being able to sniffle because of her hay fever.
Right,
So
right.
she said, "Look, no, I'll drive up on my own." And I was like, "Okay, great, thanks for that."
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely does help. During lockdown, I lived with my other younger sister, and I even noticed it. Like we're very open with each other. Then we like, "Oh, do you mind not doing that?" Oh God, yeah, sorry, because we both understand it. And then sometimes you'd watch a movie, and we'd both have a little bit of chocolate, and like I can tell that we're both just letting the chocolate melt in our
Yeah.
mouths.
Does that help? I mean, even though you're doing things that trigger, does it maybe help just knowing that at least the other person is
Yes,
sympathetic? Does it
of
reduce the
course.
stress
Of
level, right? I mean, it's like you don't have
yeah,
to, because a lot of it's just the fear that something's going to happen, and that's a lot of I think a lot of what the visual is about. It's just like,
yes.
you know,
It's 100%
yeah,
worse if you've the fear that a trigger is coming, or if you feel that you're in an environment where you can't not control it, but be open with the person you're with. You know, that you
yeah,
can't ask them to make an accommodation, which I know is hard over time. I mean, it's like I struggle with that, with constantly asking people to make compromises.
yeah.
But I would say that I have found the most positive um, aspect was telling more and more people. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, like friends and family, but that's really helped because if they're your friends and family, they do want to help and they do want to be supportive. Um, and yeah, so I think that's been really helpful for me over time, even in the workplace, actually. As soon as I understood that it was a thing, I think that really empowered me as well to, rather than hide away from it, to actually be more vocal about it and
So
to
yeah,
actually, yeah.
I'd like to hear about that because I mean, I don't know, it's maybe it's stereotypical, but your work environment, I'm visualizing pretty intense. Um, I don't know, maybe also very kind of male oriented, just type A kind of environment. So it's like if these talking about these kinds of things is just like did you feel comfortable, they're just normal doing that? Are people receptive, or is it I'm just
Yeah,
curious about
well,
that.
so I was a lot better at it in New York. So I would say that the when I moved to the New York office, that was our headquarters and it was a proper big trade floor. And that was a much easier environment
Hmm.
because there's it's almost like the restaurant thing, as long as there isn't like you can, as long as you're not focusing on one specific noise, I know, but having
No,
just a noisy backdrop is actually helpful because it
yeah.
does muffle things. um London was more challenging because it was a smaller trade floor, and actually for a trade floor it was quite quiet sometimes,
Hmm.
or not sometimes, like it just wasn't noisy all the time. And uh, definitely we moved offices at one point and I just couldn't, I was just so devastated because everyone, you're on the trade floor from early in the morning, so everyone would eat at their desks, like breakfast included. And when we moved to offices, they had proper like not plastic plates and spoons and things. It was proper
Okay.
crockery.
Oh
And I was like,
no.
you have got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna be around me eating their cereal in the morning. Um and so I would try to, just little tricks that I learned over time. So sometimes in the morning, when the research comes out and so I was in sales, you'd go through the research and then you'd prepare your email or for your client calls. So I would often just put in earphones. So I love brown noise in particular because I
Yeah.
find it more soothing than, or less harsh than white. So I
Yeah.
would do that and try and time it around when people would be eating their cereal, or I'd choose that time to go out and get a coffee, or just little sort of protective measures. And then I was lucky enough to, um, well, yeah, I sat beside two close friends in the office and I told them, and they were very supportive. And also the girl I sat beside, who's still one of my closest friends, is just a very minimal trigger person. So I definitely got lucky there.
Hmm.
But there has been so many instances. Like there was a one woman that sat across me for ages and wouldn't stop sniffling. And at one point, I just remember like standing up really aggressively and like passing over a box of tissues and be like, Angela, do you need a tissue? And she like looked up at me innocently because you can get really worked up in your head thinking she's doing it on purpose. She knows
Of
it's annoying me.
course.
She's
Yeah.
definitely doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Um, and then there was another instance. So this actually was one that made me tell more people because there was a guy that would really aggressively bang on his bowl. And I just remember one day, and he would sit with his back to me. I remember one day he was doing it when he was eating, and I just swiveled around my chair just to give him the glare. just
Yes.
because
Yeah.
even though it won't stop it, I just had to give him the dagger,
Yeah. Of course.
And I did that in the safety of, I know he sits with his back to me as well.
Oh.
And
Okay.
yes, in that moment, he swiveled his chair around to talk to someone and literally caught me bang on with my dagger eye glare. And so he said, I don't know if it's like a type A thing or a male thing, but he basically was like, what the F? And immediately like messages me on the internal work chat. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I've had enough. What the hell was that? And I was like, oh my God. So I apologized and I just said, just let me explain. And then I tried to explain a little bit what it was and then find like a link. I often link to something if I'm telling someone
Yeah.
so that they can,
Yeah.
it also makes it real, I think, if you can show an official website or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Right.
And and um he wrote me back the nicest message because he said he was just so relieved because of course I give out the dagger eyes all the time, but I don't think people notice that much.
Mm-hmm.
And in the morning meeting when we'd all sit around the table and hear the research of the day, I remember right, he would if I don't know if I should describe it in detail, but it was something about when he would drink his cup of coffee with the lid on.
Gotcha. Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
yeah. So he wrote me this message about how his wife is actually called Claire. And he was like, Claire, this is such a relief to understand this. I've been telling my wife Claire at home that there's this Claire in the office that hates me and I don't know why. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And he said, is this why you give me these evil looks in the morning meeting as well? And I was like, oh my
Uh-huh.
goodness. And then I realized how, okay, turns out not so subtle with my dagger eyes. And then I explained about the coffee cup. And
Yeah.
after that, if we were in the morning meeting together, he'd look over at me, take the lid off his coffee cup and put it down beside the cup and just drink without the lid. And I was just like, you're such a good guy. But it just changed our relationship completely because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I don't know if this happens to you. Sometimes it can really muddy the water sometimes between if someone's a trigger person and then I'm like, I just don't like them. I also don't like them.
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
especially if they're like not someone I'm that close to. And now I get to really like him.
Yeah.
So that was just a really telling moment for me where I was like, okay, you have to tell more people because people are okay making small accommodations. Like it was no skin off his back, to take the lid off the coffee cup. And yet it made such a world of difference to me. So it was really good for that to happen actually, and it empowered me to tell more people then. So I would say that it was to answer your original question. Yeah, so London was definitely more challenging because it was a bit quieter. But I was lucky with where I sat, and I would tell more people. And then in New York, definitely the bigger trade floor was better, and we went back to people ate out of paper
Mm-hmm.
plates and things from the canteen. So that was a relief as well. But of course, this all the little group that I sat beside on the trade floor. Over time, I had to tell them. But they were, they became my close friends. So you'd laugh about it. Like I'd go to a meeting and come back, and when like Meredith would be, oh, we had a crisp party while you were gone, Claire. You know?
Right. It sounds like you've had like really good luck. Well, not just good luck. I mean, you've kind of spearheaded it, but you've been able to communicate with people and
Yeah,
really change your environment. Obviously
without
sounds like obviously after it took some work, but you got
I
there.
was about to say, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been the depths of despair
Oh
moments.
yeah, we know that.
Because
Yeah.
I definitely have a quite. I know I'm high up on the scale, especially I have a lot of visual, but and actually having long hair helps as a female because I find that if I put it can protect me from the peripheral vision if I keep my hair down.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I thought you could
Because
just
so
say
that
you shove hair into your ears so that you can't hear.
no, so earphones in the ears, but then
Yeah,
if I have my hair down, it can protect me a little bit as well.
yeah.
So no, I do, yeah, for sure. It's been super challenging over the years in the office environments, but I just you learn tricks of the trade. If I think telling people really, really helps. And yeah, and I think I've been lucky with the people I've sat near as well. I've been really lucky that they've become friends, and then it's just a um, it's easier then to tell them as well. And like
have you
even there was sorry, I was just gonna,
no, go on,
there
go
was
on, go on.
there was one insane trigger person in the New York office.
Yes,
I
tell
mean,
us.
everything about him was a trigger, and there was a plan to do a seat move, and they wanted to put him beside me so that I could sort of mentor him and things like that. And basically, um, I thought of another like logical reason why it didn't make sense, why I wanted to put another member of our team in between us.
Hmm.
And then I had a friend of mine in the office speak to the head guy and reinforce that view. And so we sort of between us sort of navigated it. But it I mean, I think at that point, if they had put him sitting beside me, I would have then had to go to my boss and actually say, look,
Yeah,
actually, no, you can't.
right.
And Meredith was like, she will resign if you put him sitting beside her. Um, so so yeah, I've just yeah, I think I've learned how to navigate it. And that's I guess what I would try to encourage people as well to try to as much as they can um, instill that sort of control over their environment and tell people and see it because I, I really haven't met that many bad apples that have um, been super dismissive of it. Um, so
Yeah,
because
that's
I
the one
think
thing. I mean,
people are intrigued, if
yeah,
like they
yeah.
might be like throw their eyes to heaven or just think or maybe they say stuff behind my back, I don't know. But for the most part, you know, I think people um, are generally supportive. I'm again, I guess I've been lucky in that respect as well. Um, but yeah, what I'm hopeful as well is that there are some silver linings with COVID in terms of everyone who's been able to work from home has worked from home, and hopefully that will mean that employers will be more open and flexible so that people with misophonia will be able to go to their bosses post COVID and whether they want to tell them that they have a condition or not, at least their employers should be more open to a more flexible work environment, and I think that will probably take the edge off as well.
Absolutely, and
If
you don't have to be home like 5 days a week, but I think
mm,
if you have at least the option to be like you took off that one day, or even if it's like a fixed schedule of like a couple days
mm,
a week or something, I think that could really, like you said, just take the edge off the rest of
yeah,
the time, where you could be like, all right, at least I don't have to be here tomorrow to deal with
yeah.
Jack, who I'm going to murder if he does
His
that
name
thing.
was Jack. Did I say
Okay.
that?
Oh
I
God.
don't think I
Yeah.
mentioned his name.
No. You mentioned so many people. I don't even know which Jack you're talking about. Oh, the one who was
The
about
like
to get
trigger
mentored, quote
person.
unquote, by you.
Yes.
Right.
What was I going to say? Oh yeah, and actually I work from home now, which is amazing. As
Yeah.
in, irrespective of COVID, I moved
Okay.
back to Ireland, and so the company I work for actually had a office in Dublin, which they sort of put on the table or suggested would that be something I would be interested in because I wanted to move back home. That's why when the primary reason I left New York was to move back to Cork. So Dublin is not commutable with Cork, so I unfortunately just had to say no, no, and I wanted to take some time off, so I took a year off. And then this job came up with the firm that where I can work from home in Cork. And in a post-COVID world, I will do some days out of the Dublin office as well.
Hmm.
But for the most part, my job will be working from home in Cork, which is, I can't even tell you, it's a delight.
And is it the same company that you've been working with
Hmm.
for a while?
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
That's great. I mean, that's a great lesson for other musicians. Like, if you can find a good company that's making
Hmm.
strides or making strides to help, hang on to them and don't burn any bridges. And then you're able to do things like take a year off or and then come back and with in a pretty kind of accommodative situation, I guess.
For sure, for sure. It's been, I actually have to keep pinching myself. I only started back work with them in the summer, and I would, wake up and sit down at my desk some mornings and just smile. Like,
Yeah.
how did I pull this off? I get
Yeah.
to live in Cork and still work for them. So that, yeah, that's been a huge positive.
Yeah, another thing is that, a lot of people, I talk to people who are pretty young, maybe still in school or just out of school. And, one of the big lessons is like, yeah, you think it does get better, especially if you're able to control your
Yes.
environment. And
I
don't give up.
couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't, in fact, so I've in some of your more recent podcasts, um, I felt like so now I'm getting ahead of myself because it's sort of
Mm.
like the signing off question that you ask people is,
No,
is
no,
there any
no.
sort of message you want to leave them with or whatever? And that is like the big thing I really want to say to any younger person suffering is that it definitely gets easier. And it just gets easier because in part, I think the way just sometimes growing up can get easier. You just get a bit more self-confidence or you're not riddled with insecurities like you are in your teenage years, but you have more confidence to tell people and you do gain more control over your environment. It is really only in a sort of school college setting that you're sort of locked into these classrooms, and then with the workplace there are accommodations that can be made. There is working from home. Look, it's never going to be everything. I mean, meetings can be an absolute nightmare, or lunch meetings. Don't even get me started because in America they love to throw chips in with all lunch meetings. um,
I hate eating with my coworkers. I don't know why. I can
it's
love
brutal,
coworkers, but
but yeah, no, it does it definitely does get easier, and I think you just learn more little tricks or more ways to cope as well.
yeah.
Um,
What are
as
some
you
of
get
yours?
older.
So obviously, yeah, you've got super long hair, it sounds like. And what are some what are some, what are so other
It's
besides being like Chewbacca kind of situation,
it's not
some
it's not
other
super
I know.
it's not super long. I know. I do you know what I do know that I look like an absolute crazy person when I'm on a plane, because when I'm on a plane I will have earbuds
Oh,
in, and then the
yeah.
overhead headphones, and then I'll have a hoodie up so that that to get rid
Hmm.
of the peripheral vision. And I
Oh,
mean, I
hoodies,
know
yeah,
I
that's great when you don't have
hoodies
long
are
hair.
great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, hoodies are great. But I just know that I look absolutely like totally like a maniac. So yeah, coping mechanisms. I've heard you say this before actually, and it was something I picked up from the convention, which it sounds so simple, but I do think really helps to decompress before you enter a potential trigger situation.
Hmm.
Um, because I remember it was in one of the little breakout sessions we were talking about this, about how you can walk around full of tension and braced, like
Yeah.
braced for a trigger. And sure, that's just a terrible position to
Yeah.
put your body in, and also it means you really will jump when that trigger comes, like your whole
Yeah.
body, like I'm doing it now even as we say it. And I found that just that little tip of actually, before you walk into the office at work, just take a few deep breaths,
Yeah.
and it just it does allow you to cope with it a little bit better. I have a great little CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy,
Yeah.
um, trick that someone gave me as well before, which is um, to which helps to yourself down. So sometimes I even do it after work if I've had like a bit of like an adrenaline boost from work. That so if wherever you're sitting, just take a moment and think of five things you can feel. So like I
Hmm.
feel like my foot on the ground or whatever. Like, so five things you can feel, four things you can see, three things you can hear, 2 things you can smell and 1 thing you can taste. And you run through that exercise in your mind. And because the reason that I find it helpful as well as breathing techniques, sometimes my mind won't sit still when I'm trying to calm it.
Right.
And I find that sometimes it's just doesn't work that well. Whereas this exercise, for some reason, because you're being forced to focus on the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 things, it actually just works quite effectively at winding down your brain. Or at least it works for me. So that's another little trick that I use. I've tried everything though. I've tried the CBD oil, which I don't know if it works or not, but I think the placebo effect works.
So it does. You find it does.
I find it does. Yeah. And I'll
Okay,
do
cool.
that before even something, say like, we get together quite often as a family. We're all based in Cork.
Hmm.
And before a family event, because of course your family are major trigger people, I'll take the CBD oil. So that, yeah, I use that a little bit. Um, and so those are sort of the more practical, well, not practical, but the sort of decompressing CBD oil ones. Obviously, I use headphones all the time. Do you know, I tried did you see at the convention the hearing aid
Yeah. The
talk?
Windex
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
So I did the trial on that actually because I was curious. But I I gave them back afterwards, and the reason why they worried me a little bit was because I don't like the idea of having too permanent a crutch in my ear, because then when I take it out, everything's amplified, you know?
That's exactly my concern. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will always have my earphones with me, my wireless ones or
Yep.
earbuds or the overhead ones, but I will try to only put them in when I need to have them in so that I don't
Yep.
become this person that constantly has earphones in. Yeah. So, and brown noise, I think is great. And then what other little tricks? Oh, like family dinners, things like that. Or even when I go call over to my parents and just catching up and having a cup of tea, the first thing I'll do when I go into the kitchen is we'll put music on.
Hmm.
Um, and then,
Death
oh,
metal
always,
and high vibration.
I know sadly, no, my mom will love a bit of like
Yeah.
classical or a bit of
Oh yeah.
Frank
No, it's
Sinatra. So we
great.
just have to ramp
Yeah.
up the volume.
Right.
And then, so always have packed the tissues with you. So then you can offer someone a tissue if they sneeze.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and actually, it's very interesting in our family. Like my siblings definitely are milder than me, but all of our households, if you walk into any of them, there's packets of tissues all around the different rooms.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah,
Just
just
grab it
having them
before it starts and
exactly.
do your
Just
business, and then we can talk. So yeah.
exactly. Um, so that's another little one. Um, do you know what I miss actually? Because there really isn't that much sushi in Ireland, and I found that sushi restaurants were great because, I mean, I know there's sometimes the little bit of soup,
Udon and yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, no, but yeah. So God, no, I'd stay completely away from that. But if you have a pure sushi restaurant where
Yep.
people are ordering just sushi, then it removes the silverware and the clanging because everyone's using
Yeah.
chopsticks.
Just wooden chopsticks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're
So I
not really
used to
cutting
find
stuff up. You're just kind of basically
no,
tossing fish in your mouth, and it's
and
nice
nothing
soft
makes a lot
food.
of noise. Exactly, soft
Yeah.
food. So I do miss that because I found that was a good one. But actually that's a good tip for people if they have to do lunch meetings. Like I would have to sometimes do client lunch meetings, and I would the default was always to do sushi.
Do sushi
Um,
and make sure nobody orders
mm,
miso soup.
yeah, no miso
Tell the
soup.
restaurant do not no complimentary miso soup. I'll
Exactly.
tip you extra if you don't bring any goddamn complimentary miso soup.
This is it.
So
You gotta find the ways.
yeah.
But you know what? It's another interesting little COVID silver lining. And look, don't
Hmm.
get me wrong, I know there's so much devastation with COVID, but
Right.
we'll take our wins. And I would say that working from home is one, especially because there could be sort of longer term positive implications from that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also, um, we've gone back into a bit more restrictions here in Ireland at the moment. But over the summer, when we'd eased things up, you'd you'd go out to dinner and there was more spacing between tables,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
restaurants.
yeah.
And then also, because everyone has to wear masks, people can't walk around stores like chomping on food, and
Yeah.
like there's just less people publicly eating as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I find like there's these little nice um miso or miso friendly COVID silver linings.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we should start making a list of it. I hadn't thought about some of those, but those are interesting things that people are talking about, like less handshaking and all this stuff. But
Mm.
these are there's a lot of miso friendly habits that
Mm.
may continue.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, which would be great.
Yeah, even like you don't see people if they're chewing gum and things like
Yeah,
that.
right. And yeah, the spacing between
Spacing between tables. Yeah.
have you, other than your family, have you bumped into many people who have been like, "Oh, I have that too," or
I have.
I figure you. It
So
sounds like you're talking about this all the time. So, um,
I have diagnosed many people as well.
yeah,
But funnily enough, two of my really close friends have it by
mm,
complete coincidence. So it was actually one of my best friends from college. Um, when I started telling her, actually, I don't even think it was in college when I would have told her. She would have known I had maybe noticed the funny thing about eating, but it was when we moved to London. She had also moved to London. Um, and what she noticed was that she said her sister was the same, her younger sister, who I'd met a few times. And now her younger sister is also one of my closest friends, and she has it as well. And so I diagnosed her. But she has sometimes slightly different triggers to me. And she definitely isn't as open. I think people have to, I know, cope with it in different ways. Mine
yeah,
is
yeah.
definitely the more open, the better.
Okay.
Um, Whereas I have found this, I think even with my dad is the same, where, you know, if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist as much or something. And not that they're in denial, but there's a more of a, if I don't acknowledge it, it's not as big or something.
Can I
So
stereotype the old Irish kind of, I don't know,
yeah,
it's the old
you can
British,
certainly can.
Irish, whatever, old school white kind of country. Yeah,
Yeah, the sort of stoic
Catholic, whatever. Yeah, stoic.
defiance
Yeah.
about it. Because actually, it is funny with my dad one time, because I didn't want to sort of push him on it. Like, I mean, I definitely know a bunch of his triggers, but I do remember at one point saying to him, you know, do you have visual ones as well? Yes, yes, I do. It's like, okay.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, that he just
Because
gets it right away. Yeah. Well, that's
yeah, because
how.
he's never he has definitely somehow found a way to sort of just swallow it a bit, because
Mhm.
I definitely have to ask people at all times to make accommodations, whereas um he wouldn't talk about it as much. And to be fair now, I know we've used the stereotype of that sort of older school Irishman, but my dad has four daughters. So he has
Yeah.
come a
Oh,
long
yeah.
way in
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
like open and talking about things.
Yeah.
Um, but he definitely he wouldn't ask people to make accommodations, ask even his family members about it. He just sort of somehow is able to suck it up.
Hmm.
But I definitely don't have that strength.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, I definitely have to ask people. But yeah, so anyway, back to another tangent. So really good friend of mine has it, and then another friend of mine. It was actually weirdly my first boyfriend when I was a teenager. And then Cork is really small, so we just then stayed friends all through like school and college, and we lost touch a bit in our 20s. And then he was visiting me in London at one point, and I had then since learned the name of the thing, and I was telling him about it, and then he was like, "You're kidding me! I have that too." So it was just this magical moment where I was like, "Oh my goodness, what?" And then we were like comparing like triggers and things like that. So yeah, just random coincidence, but two of my close
Yeah.
friends have it. Oh, and I was in a relationship with someone who had it too. which again was a random coincidence. It was someone I met through work, and he was definitely milder than me, but I have to say it really helped things. It really it was
Okay, yeah,
it was almost like say like with my family as well, where you're both aware, so you're both very understanding and accommodating. Like if he had said to me, oh, can you stop doing that, I'm like, oh my god, sorry. And it things as well, I mean, we must have looked like freaks sometimes, because if say we were on like public transport together or on a plane, so we'd both have our headphones on, and
mm-hmm.
we'd message each other on our phones, or like I'd write him a
Mm-hmm.
message and show it to him. And you think if anyone is observing this, they'd be like, why can't you take off your headphones and talk to each other like
Yeah,
normal people? But it was I think it really helped the relationship. I mean, we since broke up, but not for any sort of misophonia reason. But I think it helped because I didn't have that guilt of asking someone to be making accommodations, and
yeah,
it didn't put any strain on things. Now, to be fair, I that shouldn't discourage anyone who's dating someone that doesn't have misophonia, because I've definitely had moments in the past of so I'm single now, and I've had moments of thinking, oh God, like it's not fair to ask someone to take that on, But all of my friends and family that love me will always say, like, Claire, everyone has their stuff, you know, everyone has their stuff, and you at least you know what yours is.
right.
And it's and it is always good just to remember that perspective as well, where the accommodations that you ask people to make, they're typically not big. You know, they can be the smallest little accommodations for them and make a world of a difference to you. Um, so I think that's also worth bearing in mind, because it's obviously massive what's going on in our heads. But, I have a friend who finds the whole thing entertaining. Like if she sees me, like my eyes dart, in a room to some trigger,
Oh,
like her favorite response is, "Oh my God, who is it? What is it?" It's like a game, you know?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
instead of her being like, "Oh God, what's your problem now?" Or who is it? She just finds the whole thing really entertaining. So I think, we have to trust in people as well. They're trust in the goodness of people. So yeah, I have come across a good few people. And even from telling people at work, um, in the London office, there were a couple of people, definitely milder as well. But it's funny because once you then explain to them what it is, I'd get these random emails then from one of my colleagues, like just he'd be on the train and he'd be like, Claire, you wouldn't believe what I have, what's going on the train right now. And it's nice then because you know that you've given them the name of the thing that's annoying them, and
Mm-hmm.
you've also given them a little outlet where they can now
Yeah,
message you to
right,
vent about something that they've experienced. So
right.
so yeah, I do think it's more prevalent than, I guess at some point we realize there'll be some study on what the actual numbers are, but it's uh, it's definitely
Yeah,
more
we're in the
prevalent than
early
people
days of this.
for
Yeah,
sure.
in terms of research and awareness. So yeah, I think
Hmm.
we're most you and I and a bunch of us are we're just kind of on the forefront, just letting people know about it. By the time it's probably too late for us, everyone will know about it, and the world will be a much quieter place, and we will have suffered for everybody else.
I know. I keep imagining because there are certain situations, of course, that there's very little you can do about. For example, like a plane, and I always like imagine this world where I can get on the plane and show them this little card that says, I've got misophonia, and then they'll be like, "Oh, of course, ma'am," and then
Of
like
course,
bring
we
you
have
over
a
to
silent
this like
cubicle for yeah,
special
exactly. Yeah,
seating
yeah,
area. Um, so imagine that would be the dream. But you're
yeah.
you're so good for raising the awareness with the podcasts. That's such a genius idea. I know I love podcasts, so thank you so much for doing it. I've had I've had thoughts myself of how I could do more because I currently, besides telling people and diagnosing them, I don't, I'm not on any social media. I don't exist in that world at all and would be very reluctant to. So sometimes when I listen to your podcast, I feel a little bit guilty that I should be trying to do
Yeah,
more.
Claire, why are you so okay? No, that's totally understandable. I mean, more and more people are just kind of reclaiming their independence. But I think yeah, I mean, wherever you are, if you can find some people that just beyond that kind of text message circle, or I don't know,
Yeah.
or just kind of like meet up at a a known quiet place. I think
I'm
that
gonna
would
have
make
a
a huge
think. I
difference.
definitely want to do more.
Yeah, no, I mean this has been so good. You alluded to earlier that you'd already kind of like hit your uh, message for the community. But is there anything else that you want to tell people about your story that you think is
Oh God, I think
or
I've
not
waffled
or
on long enough.
yeah, no, it
um,
has been total gold all the way. But yeah, I'm just curious if
that's very
there's
kind of you to
anything else
say.
you want to say.
No, I definitely wanted, because of course I've stolen my own thunder now, but it was just what I said earlier about, I
It
do
gets
think
easier and yeah,
it does. I do think
yeah.
it improves. Um, and, uh, and I, I do think it's an important message because when I was at the convention in Minnesota as well, and I saw, that was the first time I realized that there really was some younger folk, or that a lot of people, the onset was younger than it was for me. And I just thought that's a lot to take on when you're that age. So I do think that in as much as we can to get that message out and to speak to younger kids about it, and so that they understand, because to have it so young and then to go through your teenage years with all that brings, um, it's super overwhelming, you know?
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, no, I just really wanted to leave people with a positive message. And I think that the way the world is moving in terms of technology and flexibility, and I think it can only get better as well, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's not to say, look, I know there are just awful, despairing, dark moments with this thing that we all have, but it's manageable, you know, and and have faith in people. I think, because I've definitely been really positively surprised by colleagues, friends, family, people that I've encountered. They've, for the most part, been super supportive and accommodating, and so I think that's, so I would really encourage people as well, to be as open as they can about it.
Yeah, that's great, and I really love your tips on like just I always forget to do it too, but walking into a room and taking deep breaths or doing
Hmm.
whatever exercise you need to do. I wonder if there's like an I hate to bring up technology for the sake of technology, but like something like something to kind of like buzz you or remind you to kind of every so often, or maybe it senses that things are getting loud and until it gets you to calm down or something like that. But yeah, just taking those times, if however you remember to kind of like take a breath.
Yeah,
That's another great tip.
yeah, and I think it's just help, like, not even
It's just
healthy, but it's
healthy.
good
Yeah,
for your body as well. Like,
yeah, yeah.
it's not nice for your body to walk around full of tension and
Mm-hmm.
braced for something, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a good, once you get into the habit of it as well, it's just helpful, because you don't realize how much, um like, your body can be tense and you can be completely unaware of it, you know, because we're so used to doing it. So just even once you start to get into the habit of it, it makes you more aware of how often you brace for things.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like when you go
so
to
I guess
yoga and
I
you
do
have
have
no
one.
idea how tense you are until you're like, until they keep telling you to relax, and you're like, I am
Yeah.
relaxed.
Oh
No.
God. I was. Oh yeah, I was going to actually ask you, because
Yeah.
you've done so many of these, and you ask everyone, I think, for their coping mechanisms. Was there any that surprised you, or is there any that's like your, you know, top tip that you would recommend?
Yeah, I need to. This is exactly what I need. This is one of the things I need to review for before
Oh, I'm
the
just
thing
front
on
running your slides.
Saturday. So no, I mean I need
Okay.
to like I have all the I've been doing transcripts and stuff to just kind of so I can just kind of breeze through everything. But I don't think there's anything. I mean, you had a lot of good ones today, actually. I mean, hoodies and hair blocking vision and the deep breaths. That's deep breaths is when I bring up a lot. People, yeah, I mean, talking about it with people, just having tons of earphones. I mean, it's nothing that
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like I was just nodding along to a lot of the stuff you said because it's like, yeah,
Yeah. It's all the usual suspects.
it's the usual suspects.
Mm,
Plus, yeah, and so there isn't anything even in terms of things people ingest or what like or CBD like that, there's nothing really that's been consistent other than
no.
the usual
Yeah. Just
suspects
all
and
the little
reducing
things.
stress
Yeah.
level. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Sleep.
like
Oh my goodness, the difference that sleep can make, or
yeah.
rather, the difference that lack of sleep can make.
Yeah, and I'm one who's like, chronically just obviously I'm doing podcasts at freaking
I know. Actually, as
midnight.
I said
So
it, I was like, "Oh my God, I should really let you go now because it is midnight." And I'm gonna
hey, I
start my
work from
day over
home at
here.
least, so imagine
This
that. Yeah,
is true.
I can't imagine if I was this sleep deprived and going into an office anyways.
Oh
But
my goodness, yeah, brutal.
yeah, I nothing revolutionary yet. And I've talked to like, a few, doctors or whatever, but again, nothing
Mm,
revolutionary yet. So I'm not holding I'm not holding my breath for anything. And so
okay.
it's just, yeah, it's
It's
just more of the usual suspects, I guess, and
yeah,
just finding more
yeah,
people. If you can surround yourself with more people who have it or can accommodate, just gravitate
yeah,
yourself towards them.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. And I do notice that even more so, I guess partly because I work from home, but moving back to Cork, I mean, almost everyone that I hang out with knows the drill, you know,
Hmm.
and it is lovely,
Yeah.
it does help. Uh, so
Yeah,
yeah, I
you got a
do.
sweet
I
deal
think
over
it's
there.
no, I do. Now
But
everybody
you
move to
worked
Cork.
hard to get there. I mean, it's not. Yeah, I don't want to say
No,
that it was
God, you're
easy, but
fine.
you worked hard to get there. So, cool. Well, I want to. Yeah, let's end on that positive note. I'll probably cut
Yes.
some of my babblings out here, but
Oh, mine too, please.
yeah, yeah, I just want to say I'll do the official like, well, Claire, thanks for coming on the podcast. There's been a lot of great tips here, and you kind of zoomed into a bunch of experiences at the office and at the home that I'm sure a lot of people can totally relate to. So,
Thank you so much for having me. It has been an absolute delight. And thank you so much for doing the podcast
yeah,
in general.
Thank you, Claire. One of the longer conversations, but worth every second. Season 3 interviews are almost all done, being recorded, but do hit me up if you want to be on the show. I could squeeze in a few more, or we will get it all set up for Season 4. If you're enjoying the shows, please consider hitting the 5 stars on Apple iTunes. If you don't like the show, feel free to rant on social media or send me feedback at hello@misophonespodcast.com. Music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.